Government is slavery. Now, to most coming into this video with preconceived notions, these words will be very offensive and vexatious to your egos and said preconceived notions. But I implore you to listen to what I have to say before casting judgment and attempt to take in this information with an open mind. I would like to mention that I'm still quite new to these kind of presentation-style voiceover videos, so if anything that I say is confusing or the words happen to not come out right, please do try to bear with me, and please attempt to separate the information itself from me who is presenting the information and any imperfections I might have in my speaking. As I mentioned prior, please do leave your preconceived notions and egos at the door while listening to this and attempt to take in the information before immediately dismissing what I'm going to say. This subject will most likely not be able to be fully in-depthly discussed in one very short video. However, I will try to bring multiple concepts to your attention, even if only very brief explanations. The first and possibly biggest concept I'd like to bring up is the difference between subjective and objective morality and moral relativism. The idea of subjective morality and moral relativism is the idea that any person can determine what is right and wrong at any given moment, and that which is right and wrong can be subject to change, depending on viewpoints, culture, etc. This is a very quick explanation of the concept, but I digress. However, objective morality states that there are objective, immutable, right and wrong actions that no matter how we perceive or whether we agree or disagree with them, they are simply either right or wrong, and they cannot be changed. Now that we have the basic definitions of these, I'm going to explain how all forms of government and man's law are inherently moral relativism, and thus forth create a state of slavery where humanity follows under arbitrary laws that do not follow an objective morality, but instead subjective morality based on who decides what is right and wrong in whatever given time. To more deeply explain this, I have to bring up the concept of natural law or karmatic law. Natural law is a law of nature that governs all things in the universe. It is like gravity. It is immutable. It exists whether we choose to perceive it or not. It has also been referred to as moral law, karmatic law, the law of attraction. It states that there is objective morality, there's objective right and wrong, and that cause and effect do exist. Every action we take does have an effect into the aggregate. As above, so below. Here is where natural law and man's law, coming from government, differ. Man's law states that humanity can decide and change what is right and wrong depending solely on what group of people decide that which is right and wrong, and it is subjective to their opinion and decisions. If people want to choose to vote on a law, no matter how infringing that law is, man's law states that it can be enacted and that others have to follow it dogmatically, as well as it is enforced through coercion, threats of violence, and threats of kidnapping and punishment. Under natural law, it is made clear that only immoral actions would have negative consequences and negative karmatic effects unto the person that breaks said laws. It is not enforced via coercion, it is not enforced via threat of violence or kidnapping. There is simply a karmatic reaction, response that occurs when it is both followed and when said natural law is broken. Now, I would like to give a couple of basic examples of man's law infringing upon natural human rights, as well as their attempt to convince you that certain actions that are inherently immoral are instead, in fact, moral, as long as certain groups of individuals are enacting them. I will elaborate on that here in a moment. Firstly, though, I need to give you an example under natural law of something that is a basic human right and moral, and that is what one does unto themselves, to their own body, is their free will human choice. It is up to no one else's discretion what one can do to themselves, even if it is harmful or another deems it as harmful arbitrarily. However, if somebody goes out of their way and does something inherently immoral whilst under the influence of said thing that they've done to their body, an example would be if somebody gets drunk, that in itself is not an immoral action. For as a sovereign being, your body is your property. No one else can decide for you what you can or cannot do unto yourself, as long as the action you're choosing to take is not an act of violence to another individual. What you do with your own body is absolutely your choice. What you choose to ingest, what you choose to wear, what you choose to do unto your body, whether that be, say, tattoos, hair dye, taking illicit substances, no matter how harmful they are to yourself and how ignorant and bad of an idea it might be. It is still your body, therefore your free will right to do unto it as you choose. However, getting back to the initial point of the person who decides to become intoxicated, if that individual then decides to operate a motor vehicle irresponsibly and harms or kills someone, that would be an immoral action. However, under man's law, they say they can choose to decide what you can and cannot do to your own body, what you ingest, what physical inanimate objects you can own, or in some cases the numerical value of said inanimate objects, the way in which you choose to travel. I know in the United States, driving is considered a privilege and not a right. They feel that they can choose whether or not you are allowed on the road. Some people will say, well, not everyone is safe enough to drive, and there needs to be regulation on who can get in a vehicle or not. Even now, when you get on the road, anyone driving takes that risk. They are aware of the potential before they get behind a wheel. Even people who have passed said driving test, that does not inherently guarantee that they are able to drive to a standard that one would consider safe. But under man's law, they state that they can tell you whether or not you can travel in that way, or if you are going to be restricted to other forms of transportation that they deem fit. Moving on, they also, and this is what I was referring to before about attempting to convince you that immoral actions, as long as certain groups of people are enacting them, are not immoral, which is simply not the case. An example of this would be the police and military, and the idea that they somehow have the right to do violence unto you if they see fit, to kidnap you if they see fit, and use violence to varying degrees. These are inherently immoral actions, but according to man's law in most places, their governing power somehow is granted the right. It's really not. They don't have these rights, but they make a claim to have these rights to harm you if they see fit, which is absolutely abhorrent and not true. Nobody has the right to do said immoral things onto another individual. It directly infringes on human rights to, as I said, your own body. You're a sovereign being. Neither does any group of individuals have the right to attempt to claim that themselves or a different group of individuals has this right. A group of people cannot claim that, oh, Billy Bob Joe over there and his buddies have the right to kidnap you and imprison you because, well, enough of us say it's okay. That's simply not how it works. You cannot truly give up your human rights, and you absolutely cannot give up someone else's human rights on their behalf. That is simply not how it works, period, the end. And I hear people all the time argue, no, we need the government to protect us from those who want to harm us and kidnap us and do immoral things unto us. And then they say to arbitrarily give permission to a group of individuals to harm us, kidnap us, and do immoral things unto us. It's really quite backwards if you think about it. Once you come to a deep realization and understanding of this, you realize that the way man's law works and is enforced is no different to a typical master and slave dynamic. You dogmatically follow their laws that are imposed upon you. They take reign and trample on your inherent human rights as sovereign beings, controlling your free will, what you do to your body, what inanimate objects you can and cannot own, your means in which you are allowed to travel, what you do with your property, what you have earned, taxation, etc. They claim the right to be able to confiscate that which is yours and was legally attained by you if they so see fit. And still, people think that they have the ability to give up their free will human rights, allow others to trample on them, and can somehow decide for others to allow a governing power to control other people as well as themselves, infringing upon one's human rights. Hopefully this short presentation style video helps you see this point better and will help more people be aware and understand the fact that government is slavery. Like I said, this is a very basic entry-level video into this topic. I'll more than likely do many more videos on topics similar to this and in the same vein and realm. I would like to definitely get a longer video, or at least another video around this length, going a bit deeper into natural law and breaking it down more, as it is a highly important thing to learn about and to fully grasp and understand how the laws of the universe work. Thank you guys for listening this far. Please do leave comments. I encourage the conversation. I'll leave some links down in the description of videos and such and presentations that I recommend as a way to get more into some of the topics that I discussed, as at the time of recording this, I don't have very many videos talking about this topic on the channel already, so feel free to check those out. I do highly encourage it. Even if you don't agree with every single thing stated in those videos, it is still great to take in information and process it thoroughly.